Hello and welcome to the Agile Innovation Leaders Podcast. I'm Ola Ojako. On this podcast, I speak with world-class leaders and doers about themselves and a variety of topics spanning agile, lean innovation, business, leadership, and much more, with actionable takeaways for you, the listener.
Thank you, David, for making the time for this conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Awesome. So let's learn a bit more about you, David. Can you tell us about yourself?
Let's see. So I founded a company called Agile Velocity about 12 years ago. I live in Austin, Texas, and have two kids that are in college, trying to figure out how to get through COVID college, which is quite the crazy time. One of them started college in COVID times, and so things that's definitely a whole different experience. Let's see. So I'm a avid Longhorn fan. So Longhorns are the university here. We don't have any professional sports teams in Austin, so that was my alma mater, and so I am known for long football tailgates and being at all the sporting events. Yeah.
Awesome. Did you play any football yourself?
I did not play football, but I was the surprising thing for me is that I was not in college, but an all year round swimmer for about eight years of my life. So a strong swimming background. Started doing triathlons about 5 years ago. So I hadn't swam. I mean, I had swum in like the ocean, but like I hadn't like swam in any competitive way for like 20 years. And then I picked that back up and started doing triathlons a number of years ago. So, and I put that on the shelf, but I'm starting, the itch is coming back. So I'm starting down that path again.
Awesome. So could you tell us a bit about your background, growing up? Did you have any experiences that you would consider inflection points that maybe guided you, on the path that you're on today?
Yeah, I mean, the one that comes to mind, so my dad started his own consulting company when I was in middle school, and so I always had this vision of being an entrepreneur, starting a company. Now, when I was college and after college, I always thought it was going to be like start some custom software. I got a technical degree, so I thought it was going to be like custom software development company or something. And then the .com bust happened, and it was like, and then I started having kids, and it didn't seem like the risk to take at the time of going and doing that. So it took a little longer to get going. But what is interesting is I ended up starting my business when my son was in middle school. So it's like he's kind of got a little bit of the same type of like, hey, I've experienced this entrepreneur kind of building a business, and but that was always my bucket list. That was always that's what I want to do, is go build a business. I stumbled into Agile in around 2003 at a company where it was, we were doing Agile things, and there weren't a ton of books at the time, right? Like, it wasn't until I think Mike Cohn's Agile Estimating and Planning book came out that I was like, oh, now I see how we can run our projects, our work, and plan and forecast and do all those things. And so I had the luxury of, I worked for a company around 2003 to 5 where we started some things, but then the company I went to next, I was able to hire much of the team from the previous company. We continued our Agile journey together. And then some of those same folks were the first employees of Agile Velocity in around 2011, 2012 timeframe. So we all kind of had this Agile journey over 10 years, and then kind of ended up building this business to help organizations that are trying to adopt Agile practices and Agile ways of working. And so, those were kind of two pivotal things that like shaped ultimately building this organization that's, now, helping companies across the world with their agile transformations.
That's very impressive, David. So what made you, know this is the right time to start mine?
To start Agile Velocity?
Mm-hmm.
I would say I kind of stumbled into it, right? Like it was, so I ended at the one company. I picked up what was supposed to be just this short-term contract, a company that had just been bought by, that was like, it was called Wayport, that was bought by AT&T, but they were doing like all the Wi-Fi for Starbucks, for Hilton, at that time, and they were trying to scale, and they were like, we're agile, but we just need help scaling. And so I just kind of went in as a consultant to help them with that. It's supposed to be like a 3 to 6 month engagement. Well, I got in there and I was like, y'all are not as agile as y'all think y'all are, right? And so I remember putting together this like 1-page spreadsheet that was like, here's what I observe, here's what you could be doing better, here's what the impact of that would be. And they said, okay, go help us do that. So I didn't even know like agile coaching was a career. And all of a sudden I kind of stumbled into like coaching them, right? And helping them and guiding them. I had been a like director or executive over software development groups up until that point, but always was kind of focused on the process and the way we work and how we collaborate and how the teams are structured and all. That was always what was my focus, less about like the technical architecture and other things. Like other people were better at that than me, but like thinking about the flow and all that before I understood lean, before I understood any of that, right? Like that was just kind of innate and what I would always look at. So then all of a sudden I'm coaching them, and I always thought like after that 3 to 6 month engagement, I'd just go back and get another kind of leadership role in one of the Austin companies. But about 6 months in, I was like, this is kind of fun and I'm not half bad at it. Maybe I could build a business around this, right? And so that's when Agile Velocity was formed in 2010, about 6 months into that, where I go, okay, and then created the company and started getting more active in the local kind of user group, which Agile Austin is pretty active. They've got over 10 meetings a month just happening within that umbrella. So I started getting involved in that, started kind of building a brand around helping folks in the Agile space. And then by the end of, or I guess it was kind of into that next year that I started picking up other clients and then added a first employee, and then like, oh, okay, like now we're off, right? And it wasn't just that, we got past that first engagement, and then, okay, now there's a business here and more people are interested. And really the beginning of 2012 is when we, started getting, we got this client and this client and this client and this client. Now I'm stretched everywhere. Now I need to start adding people. So, yeah.
That's really awesome. Let's move on to, because I noticed on your website, and actually it was via your Agile Velocity website that I learned about Path to Agility, also known as P2A. So can you tell us what P2A is?
Yeah, so Path to Agility is something that emerged over kind of our years of guiding transformation changes within big enterprise organizations. And it started out in kind of two forms. One was we started in, for those that are on video, if you're not on video, you can go to path2agility.com. But
I have mine.
News on video. Oh yeah, you've got it as well. It's like we started to build out this kind of model, and the model was in response to a couple of things. One, every time the sales hotline would ring, it would be a leader saying, I need to do Agile. Can you come train my teams? right? And we would be like, all right, we can do that, but it's not just a team level problem, right? Like it has more levels to it. So we were trying to, how do we articulate that? And two, it's more than just a training thing, right? You're going to need more than training. You're going to need coaching and support and rollout, and you need to think about this as an organizational change. So we started to build out this model called Path to Agility. At the same time, we had a coach who took the Scrum guide and reverse engineered it into a set of stories that were like, were cards on a wall that were like, all right, I'm here to coach you on getting a product owner in place. In order for us to know that we have a product owner in place, here's the acceptance criteria, right? In order for us to know that we're doing good sprint planning, here's the acceptance criteria. And we built out these cards, and that really helped us as coaches to start being explicit about why are we here? What are we here to do? Because a lot of times people are like, leaders are like, I have no idea what you're going to coach, right? And so we started being explicit with that. Well, that all evolved into what we have and know of Path to Agility today, which is a capability model of 85 capabilities that have over 400 acceptance criteria for us to be able to evaluate where we are in our transformation, where we are in our adoption in an outcome-driven kind of assessment versus a just practice. What we see is too many companies that are just going through the motions of Agile. It's like, I have a daily Scrum, check. I have a Scrum Master, check. Which was that early version was kind of more like, are we doing the things? But we all know that you could do the things and still not be delivering faster or delivering with happier customers or anything like that. So we've evolved Path to Agility to become a way of assessing from an outcomes perspective, from a capability perspective. Are we actually achieving let's say little a agility, as opposed to just doing the framework that's kind of in front of us. And so we're using that with all of our clients, and we've got over 100 facilitators across the world that are using Path to Agility to guide transformations in this much more outcome-driven way.
I know that some listeners or people, well, if they're watching the video, they were wondering, is this another Agile framework?
Yeah, so we made, it's funny you ask, because we made the mistake of calling it we think it is a framework, but it's not that type of framework, right? So what we distinguish is, Scrum, SAFe, those are implementation frameworks, right? They're telling us the how, like, here's the practices that we should do. Here's the rules of how we work. We think about Path to Agility as more of a transformation framework, right? A framework on how do I guide my transformation. So think of it as an umbrella on top of Scrum, SAFe, Kanban, LESS, DAD, whatever nexus, whatever practices, user story points, whatever you're doing. Path to Agility is a lens on top of that to say, how do I guide the change? So we took Agile adoption patterns and organizational change management techniques and combined them into a way of saying, how do I get from point A to point B? Because, I mentioned that first engagement that I had, Wayport, bought by AT&T. Well, one of the mistakes I made as like the first time as a coach is I had seen 100-mile-an-hour Agile, and they were maybe at 10 or 20-mile-an-hour Agile, and I tried to yank them to 100-mile-an-hour Agile overnight. And that didn't work, right? Like that, you can't do that. You got to go from 20 to 40 and 40 to 60 and 60 to 80. And sometimes when you go from 80 to 100, you throw out some of the things you learned at, some of the training wheels types of things that you learned early. Well, Path to Agility is a lens for you to see, where are we? Are we at 20? Are we at 40? Are we at 60? Are we at 80? And given where we are, it informs our next steps, right? Because we can't jump and leapfrog all the way to 100. While you maybe could do that if you were a 10-person company, an enterprise, most of our organizations we deal with are in the thousands in the organization that's transforming. you can't change like that. Like you're trying to turn a aircraft carrier around, and it takes time, right? And it's almost like we're trying to turn it into the wind, right? Like, and it keeps blowing back, So yeah, it's a challenging thing, but getting a better sense of where we are and better intel on what to do next is what Path to Agility is trying to help organizations and leaders with.
You mentioned something earlier about, helping organizations with evaluating where they are in the transformation. So that gives me the impression that it could be used for, no matter what, implementation framework they've adopted, it's still there. It still fits in seamlessly with helping them look at it from an outcome-based focus. So that's one. So that's a type of organization that has already started.
Right.
But there probably would also be organizations, let's say they're in the early stages or they've not yet started. If they, implement this with whatever they choose, it probably will save them a lot of heartache because they're starting from an outcome-based focus. So for the first scenario where an organization has already started, how would you typically go about introducing P2A, and how would they, how can, at a high level, how would you go about?
So first one, like I guess the first thing is very few organizations at this point are on their first agile transformation, right? Like, and what I kind of what I thought about it is that, 10 years ago, prior to 10 years ago, everything was grassroots agile, right? Like when I told the story, it was like the developers were the ones introducing agile at that first company in the aughts, right? But then about 10 years ago, everything was Scrum based. It was really team only agile transformation, applying Scrum. Then, 6-7 years ago, SAFe and other scaling frameworks started to emerge because and it's really the team level unlocked the ability for us to think about how it could be applied across like the system of teams, team of teams, in a 100 to 200 person organization. And so the scaling techniques, so then we started seeing all these scaling transformations. And now we're on the cusp of introducing the next era, which is business agility, and how now that we've seen how it can apply at like these kind of sub-orgs, now we could see how it could be applied across the whole org, right? And that's starting to turn to that. So I would say all that's just an evolution. And so most companies are in a transformation somewhere along that horizon. And so what Path to Agility helps you do is figure out where you are, right? And figure out when, and some transformations have stalled, right? So it could be a way of re-energizing, right? To get a sense of, okay, a lot of times people think we're done because we implemented all the things, right? We did all the stuff in the picture. We have an RTE, we have an ART, we do PI planning. We're doing all the things. So we're done. Well, not necessarily, right? Like maybe, we have 5 stages in Path to Agility. Maybe you've learned those things, but the next stage is, have you gotten predictable delivery out of those things? And then the next stage is, are you optimizing for speed and reducing cycle time by doing those things? And then the 5th stage is, are you adapting based on what the market is telling you? Because you can now deliver quickly. Are you actually sensing and responding based on what the market is saying? And are you running quick experiments? Are you testing and learning, right? Like those are different levels of kind of maturity. And very few companies are actually at that 5th stage. Most are actually kind of exiting learn, trying to get predictable, and haven't achieved speed. So what I would say is, for most organizations, Path to Agility can help them assess where they are if they already are doing some transformation efforts, and it'll better inform their next actions. And then for the second kind of scenario you said, where they're kind of more just starting, well, they're probably just starting somewhere along that evolution, right? Like there's already some agile teams happening somewhere, right? So they're not necessarily starting like, I've never done agile before, but what it can help them do is determine what practices we need. So we would say figure out your business outcome. Like we want to deliver faster, whatever that is. Then figure out the minimum number, like what capabilities do you need to enable that? And Path to Agility helps with that. And then do the minimal amount of practice change in order to support that. Don't just go implement all the things, right? Because you may not need all those things. And if you get lost in just doing all those things, you might not actually achieve the outcome that you're after.
Awesome. So how would you conduct the assessment for some, listeners like curious to say, but yeah, well, it sounds really interesting, but how would the assessment go, and how would you then go on to choose what capabilities you need, and how we're going to measure?
Yeah, there's two fidelities, I would say, of ability to kind of assess with Path to Agility. And then I think it's important to mention kind of our philosophy around assessment. So we don't believe in assessing just to get a score, right? We believe in the process of self-evaluation or self-assessment enables the intelligence to determine action, right? The only reason so we don't want to just turn assessment into report card. We've seen that. And then it's just weaponized and it's not really that useful. Well, so that means anytime we do assessment, we want the people that can take action in the room doing it, right? We don't want it to also, we don't believe in just offline fill out a survey, because that doesn't invoke conversation and doesn't invoke action. So all of our assessment kind of processes are built around the notion of a facilitated session with the people. Like, say we're going to do an assessment with just a single team. We could just do that, but we would do it with the team, right? Because then we would say, okay, given what you learned and where you are and what Path to Agility is saying, hey, here are some of the next steps, then you can determine what actions you want to take. If you're doing that across a system or say an organization of like 150 people, well, then you would want to bring the leadership team of that organization in, because they're the ones that are going to need to prioritize action and take action based on that, right? So then you would do a facilitated session with them and work through that.
Okay. Now, there's something you've been mentioning. You've mentioned like team, system, organization. Well, some people who might not be familiar with the term. So the team is like, a normal team, the team that actually will do the work, day to day, and you might have multiple of those teams. The system, is that the same thing as a program, or
it could yeah, it could be. And if you are, so system, we're not talking about like a technical system. We're talking about the system of teams or the team of teams, the flow of work through the system. If you're doing a safe implementation, then system and art are usually pretty synonymous. That kind of scale, assuming that you formed your arts correctly, aligned to value, and some things like that. So it would be more akin to, all right, I need these 10 teams to deliver a product together. So however we're aligning around value and being more product centric, that's typically the system. And then the org is typically aligned more with kind of a lot of times more of a hierarchical kind of context in an organization. It could be like the VP's organization. Where is the transformation change happening? In some of our large clients where we have 5,000, so one of our case studies is with Southwest Airlines, so I can mention that one. So, they had 5,000 people in their technology organization, but the cruise systems, that organization, was led by a gentleman named Marty Garza, and he had, 250 people in that organization, and that was the focus of some of the transformational efforts. So we got his leadership team together, right, to look at kind of their transformational roadmap and backlog and plan, and applied that organizational lens. And then we worked with the marketing organization, we apply a different lens, right? Like, so depending on that organizational kind of context, most of the time, these big transformations, I say, are really like transformations inside of transformations inside of transformations, because it's really, you've got the larger scope, but then, all right, we're going to have a wave approach if we're going to do crew, and then we're going to do, ground ops and then tech ops, and like we're going to roll out these different parts. We're not going to do all of them at once, typically, right? It's going to be kind of a waved approach. And so that org lens is whatever that kind of context that we're looking at.
That makes sense. So what's next for Path to Agility?
Yeah, so we actually had the luxury this last year that we've taken what was in this card form that I mentioned originally, and then with COVID we had to convert that to virtual Miro and mural boards and do all of our workshops in that form. But over the last year, we've actually invested in building a software tool and product around Path to Agility called Path to Agility Navigator. And that's just enabling the assessment, the visualization, the kind of impediments, the tracking, the management of your transformation to just be done so much easier. And it's not like stuff hiding in a Miro or hiding in a mural, right? Or in all these different PowerPoints or whatever. So we're actually launching that product this quarter, and so yeah, Path to Agility Navigator. We'll put a link in the materials. But in that, if that's something interesting as far as the visualization and management of your transformation, we're excited to have done a lot of work on that and launching that this month.
And it does look cool. I was at the Path to Agility Facilitators mini conference and Steph's demo was awesome. It shows a lot of promise. I can't wait to play around with it myself.
Yeah.
So what do you then, because you have helped lots of organizations since you started back in 2010, 11, 12, with their transformation and evaluating where they are at now. So what would be your advice for leaders already on their transformation?
Yeah. So one, we kind of have hit on it, but just to put a pin in it is to say, when you're thinking about your transformation, start with, I guess the end in mind, but what's the outcome? Your goal is not to be agile, right? Or not to implement agile, or not to implement safe. Those are not goals. That's not going to motivate anybody. So what you've got to have this kind of vision statement, mission statement that you're making really clear, that's motivating change in your organization that people can get excited about. The reason why we're doing this change is because we're trying to we need to be more responsive in the market. If we're not more responsive, we're getting left behind, right? We're losing market share, what's creating the urgency for change. And if you can't find it, then don't do it, right? Because it's hard and it's difficult, and you won't persevere through the change if you can't come up with this clear mission of why you're doing it. That's going to motivate not just the leaders, not just the board, but motivate, more importantly, all the people, right? That are going to be part of the change. So that's got to be, and it's got to be business outcome focused, not practices centric. Second is the leadership team has to lead the change. And it's not enough to say, Mr. VP, that I support the Agile. You've got to be engaged in the transformation efforts. You've got to be identifying how you need to potentially shift your questions, your behavior, your actions, right? I don't know how many times I've seen a leader say, hey, yeah, y'all go do Agile, but what's the date and what's going to be in it, right? You're still asking the same question. So I encourage leaders to change, instead of asking these very delivery focused kind of questions, to ask, what are you learning? And how can I help, right? What can I do to support you? What impediments can I remove for you that are organizational? The leaders have to go attack the organizational and systemic impediments that emerge, right? And they've got to lead those change efforts while the teams are trying to change themselves, right? And how they're working. So it's not enough just to say, go train my teams or go train the people to do work differently. You've got to think about, what are you doing differently that's encouraging? And the reason why I say, what are you learning? Is we want to start encouraging a continuous improvement culture. And so you've got to apply accountability to, are you having meaningful retrospectives and taking action? What are you learning? What are you doing to improve? And if you don't ever ask that question, you're only asking like, are you going to make the date? Then they're not going to focus on improving, right? They're going to focus on just delivering. But if they can focus on improving, then they'll actually start delivering more successfully, right? You'll get what you want out of it. You want them to deliver faster. You want them to do those things, but ask them and start putting the onus on, what are they learning, right? Challenging them in that way.
Awesome. So what books have you, recommended most to people and why?
I think that was I got it right here. I think, I'm a big David Marquet fan. And so, Turn the Ship Around, and I've seen him speak multiple times, is always great. But the one he came out with, just like, I don't know, this was like a year or two ago, was the Leadership as Language. And, he says there, the hidden power of what you say and what you don't, right? Like, again, if you're a leader and you're trying to think about, okay, how do I, you say, oh, I need to operate differently, but I'm kicked out of the room. I don't get invited to the sprint plannings, and I'm not allowed in the retrospectives. So what is it that I need to do differently? Books like that are things that, start helping you see, okay, how can I lead in a more outcome-based way, right? Give people purpose, but get out of the way of the how, right? I think that's kind of where I would point folks.
Okay. Well, thank you. I've noted that, and it would be links to both books, Turn the Ship Around, which you mentioned, and Leadership as Language, which will be in the show notes. And how can the audience find you if they want to get in touch with you or engage with you?
Yeah. So, our two kind of brands that we've talked about here. So agilevelocity.com, path2agility.com as well are kind of the two different things that we've talked about here. And you can reach out on both of those websites, and we're small but mighty. So, that's an easy way to find me. There are 3 Davids on our team now. So you do need to be specific with my last name, or else you might get to one of the other Davids. So, we actually hired 2 in December. So it was like, we went from 1 to 3 overnight. Now we actually have to use last names. So.
Well, and are you on social media by any chance?
Yeah, so I'm actually Austin Agile is but I'm not. I haven't been very active in Twitter in a long time. But that's LinkedIn is probably better, and I think my profile is David Hawks 1 or something like that. So
we'll put that. Yeah. No worries. Yeah. We'll find the link. So
LinkedIn's probably the best, and then that's where I'm more active.
Right. So would there be anything you'd like the audience to do? Based on what we've discussed so far, is there anything?
Yeah, I mean, if you're involved in Agile transformation, transition, adoption, trying to improve your ways of working, then I would just encourage you to think about, is there a clear business driver that everybody is aware of, right? Is that, you might be aware of it as the leader. Is everybody aware of why you're doing it? Or if you went and polled why we're doing it, would they say, well, because, Joe VP told me to? Or would they say, because we're implementing SAFe? right? Like why are we implementing SAFe, right? And the reason for that is if people aren't motivated to change, then you're not going to persevere through it's tough, right? There's some tough things that have to happen. So, and then I think thinking about changing your language in terms of kind of applying more of an accountability for learning and continuous improvement versus an accountability. We have plenty of accountability towards like getting things done, right? So I would encourage folks to kind of shift that a little bit.
I like what you said about changing or modifying the accountability so that you're also measuring learning and continuous improvement and not just about getting tasks done. Thank you so much, David. It's been very insightful speaking with you, and I can't wait to see what comes up with the Path to Agility platform. So thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That's all we have for now. Thanks for listening. If you like this show, do subscribe at www.agileinnovationleaders.com. That's agileinnovationleaders.com, or your favorite podcast provider. Also share with friends and do leave a review on iTunes. This would help others find this show. I'd also love to hear from you, so please drop me an email at ola@agileinnovationleaders.com. Take care and God bless.